This video is looking at thematic analysis, which is another method for analysing qualitative data. So thematic analysis basically involves identifying, then analysing, and then reporting patterns or themes within data. So thematic analysis looks at patterns in qualitative data. So thematic analysis can be used to analyse most types of qualitative data. So that could include qualitative data collected from interviews or focus groups used in marketing, survey responses, diary entries, could be stories, television shows, newspapers, graffiti. There's an interesting thematic analysis about the graffiti on the back of toilet doors in male and female cubicles. So it really does lend itself to any type of qualitative data. It involves identifying, analysing, and then reporting themes within that data. And then these themes can be compared using some complex graphs to display the differences and the interconnectedness between these themes. So you can see a very small image here. This is a thematic analysis of the Iraq War inquiry, and you can see the relationship between various different themes in that data there. So it's not a graph in the sense of a bar chart where we're displaying quantitative data, but we can still perform and conduct a thematic analysis on qualitative data and then draw it up in a type of chart there. So the method for conducting a thematic analysis. The first thing we need to do is create a transcript of the data. So quite often a thematic analysis is involving spoken word, so it could be a conversation or an interview or a speech, in which case we need to have that in a written form. So we need to transcribe it in the beginning, which is a very lengthy process, but the good news is that often nowadays you can send off a video or an audio recording and you can have that transcribed within a couple of hours. So we need to transcribe it unless it's already in the written form, in which case there's no need to do this step. Then we need to familiarise ourselves with the data, just like in content analysis, which means reading through the transcript, reading through the speech, to see what themes emerge from that data. Now, when we're talking about themes, we're really just talking about recurring images or recurring ideas and things that keep cropping up. And whether, that could be implicit or explicit meanings, but just things that keep appearing in the data. And these emerge through the familiarization phase. So after we decide on the particular themes which emerge from the data, then we're going to go through and code and find evidence for each of these themes. So typically we're just going to go through with a highlighter, for example, and just make a note of every time each theme appears. And now this is where it differs from a content analysis, is because we're not converting this into quantitative data. So we're not tallying the number of times a theme appears. We're simply just gathering evidence for each of these themes. And then when we write it up at the end in our report, we're going to use quotes that best summarize these themes. And we're going to write this up as a detailed discussion. So I'm going to show you an example of one that I have prepared here. So this is a thematic analysis of Aqua's Barbie Girl. You'll know this song from the 90s. No song better encapsulates the 90s than this song. So here I've provided a transcript of that data. So I've just got the lyrics off the internet. And you can see I've just picked a small section of that song to analyse here. So the first step is to transcribe the data and then familiarise yourself with it. So I've read through this a few times and I've decided that there are some themes which emerge, some ideas and some sentiments, either implicit or explicit, which keep cropping up. And here are my themes here. So objectification or sexualisation of women, focus on women's physical appearance, gender stereotyping, and elements of control. Now, as you can see, this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, we're just having a little bit of fun with this, but the themes, of course, are going to be subject to your own biases. So bear that in mind. This is just for fun, but obviously the themes emerge relative to your subjective opinions as well. Okay, so our themes I've decided upon. Our next step now is to go through the data and highlight evidence for each theme. So we're just going to be coding evidence for each theme, and I'm just going to color code it. So here you can see I have got focus on women's appearance in blue, and I've got blonde there. Gender stereotyping, bimbo girl, and glamour in pink. I've got objectification, dress me up, I'm your dolly, kiss me here, etc. And then control as well, you're my doll. So you might disagree, and that's absolutely fine. It just means that my coding isn't very objective, or I haven't explained my themes well enough. Alright, so now we're up to our write-up. This is our final step. Now that we've gathered evidence of each of our themes, we need to write this up as part of our report. And it may look something like this. So spend a moment just reading through my discussion of Barbie Girl. So as you can see, I've included the quotes from the song itself as evidence as part of a more general discussion of the themes that emerge from that song. So it almost does read a little bit like an English essay in that you're discussing an idea or a theme, and then you're using evidence to support that theme. Alright, so the strengths and limitations of thematic analysis. One of the main strengths of thematic analysis is that the data is accessible. So just like content analysis, you're using data that is generally in the public domain and is readily available. So it could be television advertisements or speeches, front page newspaper headlines, etc. So all of it is readily accessible, which of course means that it is sometimes more cost effective. You don't need to go and collect the data yourself. All you need to do is make sure that you're accessing appropriate sources, but they're usually already readily available. As a method on its own, it doesn't necessarily tell us that much information, but what thematic analysis is really useful for is in mixed method designs or in the process of triangulation, which is where we use more than one method to collect data on the same topic. So we might use a thematic analysis alongside a content analysis, perhaps interviews and self-report as well. And so it just provides us with some more rich data to add to our discussion and to get a better feeling perhaps for that data and for the behaviour or ideas that we're researching. Alright, in terms of limitations, it is not a scientific method. It has got problems with reliability. Obviously, there are numerous potential interpretations of data and its potential for researcher subjectivity, which might distort or bias the analysis. So it's not objective in any sense. Even when done really well, you're bringing your own preconceptions to the data, and that's of course going to create a biased interpretation of that data. And it's not scientific because it doesn't really lend itself very well to statistical analysis. And so any interpretations or conclusions that you draw from your thematic analysis are going to be subjective. They're not going to be based on data. They're not going to be based on any inferential testing. So we just need to be mindful that on its own, thematic analysis is not particularly scientific or objective, but as part of a mixed method design and in the process of triangulation, it can be really useful to explain a phenomenon when it's used alongside other techniques like content analysis.